Welcome back to another FPL video and podcast. This will be the best wildcard team for Game Week 12, and it's definitely team dependent, but a lot of you might be looking to use the chip this week, and I think Game Week 12 is a great opportunity. Otherwise, you may look towards Game Week 14, 16 or 18, and the second wildcard comes into play in Game Week 20, so ensure you use your first one before Game Week 20, and in terms of suspensions, you have to basically ensure that your players don't get 5 yellow cards before Game Week 19, then the threshold increases to 10. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and on screen you can see Drafthound and their player rankings for the next 3 game weeks. Salah is top, Fernandes has jumped to second, with Haaland, Mbeumo and Son in the top 5. Cunha, Gvardiol, Solanke, Palmer and Isak also finish up the top 10, but there will be changes over the next couple of weeks in these player rankings, and this is only one of many different tools at your disposal with Drafthound. There is a link in the description below. I'd highly suggest you check it out. I'll also be referring to it in my transfer plans and team selection videos coming up very soon. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, I promise to get this to over 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. We're going to get to that goal by this time next month in one of the UCL Fantasy deadline streams, so thank you very much for your support. Check all the other links in the description below for my Twitter and Instagram, the Patreon, Championships Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. As usual, I'll go for a 50-man squad for the wildcard chip, as I tend to do in every single game week, and I encourage you to leave your thoughts in terms of alternatives in the comments section, but I will discuss some possible downgrades you could make just in case you aren't able to afford this. My squad value is roughly 102.7 million, so it will vary depending on your selling prices and how much value you have tied up in certain plays, including those that may feature in this wildcard team. And before I begin with the 2 goalkeepers, I want to give a few injury updates, and one of them is about Semenyo, who has withdrawn from the Ghana squad, and the reason was the following. So patella tendon injury due to overload of games. The club medical team thought it wise to use the break to refer him to a tendon specialist to prevent worsening of the injury. So I believe Semenyo will be available for Game Week 12, but it looks like he's being rested as a precaution, and we're seeing that with so many players in this international break. Martin Odegaard, Saka and Declan Rice are other examples. Even Trent Alexander-Arnold, up to 8 players withdrew from the England national team. And with Trent, we got yet another update building upon what I discussed in the Transits podcast, and this time it's by Paul Joyce, who says the following. Trent Alexander-Arnold is set to be sidelined for a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. Avoided more serious damage by coming off early against Aston Villa. Not ruled out of Southampton on November the 24th, ahead of Real Madrid and Man City. So basically up until December, there is still a chance that Trent will be available for those 2 massive games coming up for Liverpool, and he hasn't been ruled out of Game Week 12. I think he'll be available. Check out that Transits podcast to see the reasons why I think he might be worth holding on to. But let's now jump straight into the 2 goalkeepers and build the best 50-man squad on the wildcard. In isolation, I'd probably declare Onana as the best goalkeeper in FPL, but I wouldn't double up on either Chelsea or Man United defensively. I'd rather go for a balance, and that's why Robert Sanchez once again makes a spot in this wildcard squad. But Chelsea aren't the greatest defensively. I just think their fixtures until Game Week 20, essentially until the end of the year, is fantastic, and I could see several clean sheets for the Blues, who are in a great position to finish in 4th place this season. They've made a lot of progress under Enzo Maresca, and they're playing some good football as well from time to time. So I think Robert Sanchez is the best way of covering Chelsea defensively. I wouldn't risk it with Reece James, who is a major injury risk all the time. He gets so many problems with his fitness. Then you've got Colwill and all these other starting defenders who don't offer enough bonus points or attacking potential, whilst Robert Sanchez can get saves and bonus points. So I think it's a very simple pick, going for a 4.7 million goalkeeper and having a backup at only 4 million in Fabianski, who got 9 points in Game Week 11 against Everton. I think this is a great goalkeeper pairing for the next month or 2, and probably even beyond that. But the other goalkeepers I'd recommend instead of Sanchez would include Onana, Verbruggen. I still think Sells is decent, but instead of him, I look in a different direction towards Alisson or potentially David Raya. But I think there is a better way of covering both Liverpool and Arsenal defensively. So I just stick with Sanchez, Onana or Verbruggen as your main goalkeeper. I'm still very bullish on Trent Alexander-Arnold, and you've got Virgil van Dijk, who is the highest scoring defender in FPL so far this season. But Konate is probably the best value Liverpool defender right now. If he can stay fit, He offers a bit of attacking potential with 1 goal and 1 assist so far this season, which is more than Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he hasn't got many bonus points with just the 1 so far this season, but I do back Konate to be a great presence in that Liverpool defence. He's probably been one of their standout players in this new campaign and helping Liverpool to be by far the most consistent team in the Premier League up until now. And Southampton away next is a plum fixture. Then you've got Man City and Newcastle, which is quite tough, but I could see Liverpool potentially keeping a clean sheet in one of those matches, especially at St James's Park. So Konate makes a lot of sense on the wild card, and if I had the wild card right now in Game Week 12, I think Konate would be one of the first names on the team sheet. Next up is Gabriel, and it's quite difficult to really back Arsenal defensively with no clean sheet since Game Week 4, but they've got a nice fixture swing now from Game Week 12 onwards, and I'd definitely go for at least one Arsenal defender or David Raya in goal, and Gabriel is still the best option with his goal threat. He can get bonus points and the clean sheets will come in my opinion, but I wouldn't double up on Arsenal defensively right now. I don't think it's a bad idea, and you could basically be hedging your bets and also going against the grain and gaining a lot in the process, but I think 1 is more than enough, and I'd rather go for Konate if you want to go for another mid-price to premium defender. But now let's go for some budget options in this position, and Mazraoui is one of them. Now Dalot might arguably be the better option. He was subbed off before 60 minutes in Game Week 11, but I don't think that'll happen too often. Mazraoui has a bit of assist threat, and he can get bonus points as he showed in Game Week 11, and he only costs 4.6 million, so I really back Mazraoui to be a nice budget defender, and if he can stay fit, he can be a nice long-term option in your setup. But over the next 2 game weeks in particular, I could see United keeping at least 1 clean sheet and Mazraoui getting some bonus points or an attacking return in the process. Now, I probably wouldn't say the same thing about Aït-Nouri in Game Week 12. I think he's benchable against Fulham away, but Wolves are top of the fixture difficulty rating until Game Week 18. I bought him last week with that plum fixture against Southampton at home, and I think he was a bit unlucky not to walk away with another attacking return. He already has 3 goals and 2 assists this season, which is incredible for a budget left back, but I think Aït-Nouri won't get many clean sheets, but you can rotate him with Mazraoui and your other budget defenders to then go alongside Gabriel and Konate, who will pretty much start in most weeks with this team. Now, let's complete this setup with someone I haven't talked about for a very long time, and that's going to be Lewis Hall, who has been playing quite well recently, and he's been nailed on since the return of Fabian Schär to the lineup. And Lewis Hall has a bit of attacking potential, and he can get bonus points when Newcastle win a game narrowly and keep a clean sheet, or it's basically a goalless draw. So I do back Lewis Hall to be a decent 4.4 million defender, and I am being asked a lot in recent streams about the best 4.5 million and under defenders. I think Lewis Hall and Joachim Andersen will be the 2 standouts. Maybe you'd put Kirkes in that conversation as well, and until recently Mazraoui was also priced at 4.5 million, but due to his performances recently, especially against Leicester City, a lot of people are investing in some of these options, but they still have very low ownership in the grand scheme of things. So with this defensive line, you're covering Chelsea defensively through Robert Sanchez. You've got a 4 million backup goalkeeper in Fabianski. You're covering 2 of the best teams in the league in Arsenal and Liverpool, and I think they've got great fixtures, particularly in the case of Arsenal, up until April, you could argue. Then you've got Mazraoui, Aït-Nouri and Lewis Hall competing for that 3rd spot, and they're good enough to sometimes potentially go to a back 4, especially if you've got a few suspensions or injuries in your attacking areas, but you may want to keep some of these players, and we're going to talk about some of them right now in the midfield section. Earlier in this video, I said Konate would be one of the first names on the team sheet, but I think that's probably tenfold with the likes of Mohamed Salah. He has been the best FPL asset so far this season, the only player to have more than 100 FPL points, and I think the likes of Palmer will compete with him over the next few weeks. But Salah against Southampton away, it seems too good to be true. A great triple captaincy option for those that haven't used that booster, and even in future weeks like Man City and Newcastle, I could see Salah getting plenty of attacking returns. His consistency has been outstanding. 7 double-digit hauls in 11 game weeks. It's one of the best starts we've ever seen from a player in FPL for the first 11 game weeks, and I think he'll continue this trajectory, and he is carrying that Liverpool attack, which have other good options by the way, but Salah is by far the best option with the goals and assist threat combined, and I think he should be one of the first names on the team sheet. He's not essential, but if you're asking me to pick between Salah or Haaland right now, it would be Salah, and that has been the case for the last couple of game weeks. Now the second midfielder is going to be Cole Palmer, who is no longer yellow flagged. He played against Arsenal. It wasn't a great performance, but I do back Palmer to bounce back from the injury he suffered recently and to really push on against Leicester away in Game Week 12. Another great captaincy shout, and you could go against Salah with the likes of Palmer, and long-term Chelsea have great fixtures, and that's why you could double or triple up on the Blues. And I think the best assets in order will be Palmer, Jackson, and Robert Sanchez. I'm not too interested in the rest, despite Pedro Neto's great haul against Arsenal, and you've also got other defender options to potentially consider, but I think those three are probably by far the best options in Chelsea. So next up, I'm going to go for another consistent choice. He might not have the same ceiling as a Salah or Palmer, but he's going to get you goals and assists on a very consistent basis, and that is Saka, who is currently yellow flagged, but I think he'll be available against Nottingham Forest. Now, Mikel Arteta said straight after the game that the injury is serious, and the same goes for Declan Rice. Otherwise, they would have completed the game, and they have withdrawn from the England squad. So I think they'll rest, recover, and also be building on that fitness with the Arsenal squad over the next couple of weeks in preparation for a massive game against Nottingham Forest. They're in a similar position in the league table, and Arsenal have a good record against Nottingham Forest in home matches, and Saka also boasts a very impressive record against that opposition. He got a double-digit haul last season at the Emirates, so I think Saka could do something similar, despite how stern that Nottingham Forest defence has been in this new campaign. But they did leak chances in Game Week 11 against Newcastle, and I think Arsenal will start a run at some stage. It's just a question of when, and Game Week 12 looks like a great time to do so on paper after a winless streak of 4 matches, something that is quite boring and repetitive in the Arsenal cycle. Every single year they go on these winless streaks, which ultimately cost them the Premier League title among other competitions as well. But let's complete this midfield with some different options. One of them will be a budget choice in Morgan Rogers, but later on I'm going to show you a very stacked midfield which contains Salah, Palmer and Saka, but also another mid-priced option instead of Morgan Rogers, and I'll talk about some of the differences and possible downgrades you could make to actually make that happen. But Rogers is still one of the best budget midfielders in the game, although Smith Rowe is in great form at the moment, and you've also got Semenyo, who is a suspension risk, 1 more yellow before Game Week 19, and he will miss a Premier League match. The same goes for Aït-Nouri. So I've gone for Morgan Rogers, who faces Crystal Palace at home, and Aston Villa are another example of a team that have a great fixture swing from Game Week 12 onwards. And for the next 2 game weeks, I would still consider either Wissa or Brian Mbeumo in your FPL team for the wildcard, or just using normal transfers. But from Game Week 14 or 15, when Brentford's fixtures look worse, you could argue Mbeumo is a sell. But on the wildcard now, I wouldn't go without Mbeumo against Everton away or Leicester at home, and the same goes for Wissa. At least go for one of them, and in isolation you could argue that Wissa is slightly the better FPL asset based on recent form. We've got so many options up front all of a sudden, and that's why I'm going for some different options compared to previous wildcard teams. If you have seen my recent FPL videos or live streams, you'll probably know how bullish I am on Danny Welbeck. He has a poor record against Man City, so I did discuss this going into Game Week 11, but I think longer term he was always a very good purchase, even as soon as Game Week 11, and now with Brian having a great fixture swing up until Game Week 18, I think he makes for a very good purchase. He's my favourite Brighton asset, even over João Pedro at this moment in time. That could certainly change over the next couple of weeks, but I think João Pedro is a slight rotation risk for Game Week 12 anyway, and I'd probably look to buy him in Game Week 13 instead. And if I'm buying one right now, I think Danny Welbeck takes the cake. He has great underlying stats with 6 goals and 2 assists so far this season, and he's fixture proof. He got an assist at Anfield, even though Kadioglu did most of the work. He also scored at St James's Park, and I just don't really see many fixtures apart from Man City and possibly Liverpool being really difficult for Danny Welbeck. He could score or assist against most opponents and be very consistent while doing so, especially over the next couple of weeks when Brighton are near the top of the FDR alongside the likes of Wolves and Chelsea as well. Now, as much as there's so many budget forwards in the game right now, I wouldn't recommend going for all 3 of them at the same time. I think my preference in terms of structure would be to have one mid-priced to premium forward, just to make your squad more flexible so you can jump between different strategies and also target fixture swings accordingly. You might want to go back to Erling Haaland at some stage or jump between Isak and Watkins up front. So that's what I'd recommend, but you could still get away with a front 3 of Danny Welbeck, Chris Wood, and let's say Strand Larsen, to name one particular example. But next up, I'm going for Cunha, who has featured in the last couple of wildcard videos, and I was bullish on him for a few weeks now. That's returned in 4 of the last 5 games, and I finally bought him in Game Week 11, and he delivered 12 points against Southampton. He's a bonus points machine, also very good with creativity. His underlying stats with expected assists, chances created, big chances created is also very impressive for a budget forward, and I think he's worth the extra 1 million over Strand Larsen. I've always said this, but also bear in mind what you could do with that extra million. If you could also make other upgrades in other positions, you might want to go for Strand Larsen or another budget forward, and there are so many in the game right now, such as Chris Wood, but I wouldn't be looking to buy him at this stage. Raul Jimenez, Delap, I think Vardy is decent when he returns, but I think he's probably lower down in the pecking order, not to mention Joao Pedro and many others like Strand Larsen. But finally, I'm going for a mid-price to premium forward to complete this team, and that's going to be Alexander Isak, who has returned in the last 3 Premier League games, scoring against very tough opposition in Chelsea, Arsenal and Nottingham Forest. He's a talismanic figure who's on penalties. He just needs 1 goal to get 2 or 3 bonus points, and his form is sensational. It's West Ham at home next. I think Newcastle could put them to the sword and score 3 or 4 goals despite their struggles over this season, but I think Newcastle have turned the corner and they could be competing for 6th or possibly even 4th place. I think it's definitely there for the taking with how the league is shaping up so far this season, and he's by far the best Newcastle asset, even over Anthony Gordon. Last season would have been a different debate and it was very neck and neck between those two, but this campaign, I think Isak is taking another step and he's by far the best Newcastle player in that team. Let's now discuss the starting 11. I'd go for Robert Sanchez in goal, and last week I actually suggested starting Fabianski over most goalkeepers, including Robert Sanchez, and that would have resulted in a lot of points gained for those that went for that sort of goalkeeper pairing. Gabriel, Mazraoui and Konate as the back three, all with good fixtures on paper. Nottingham Forest at home for Arsenal, Ipswich Town away for Man United, and then Southampton away for Liverpool. A midfield 5 of Mbeumo, Saka, Salah, Palmer and Rodgers, and a front 2 of Welbeck and Isak. Now this bench is very strong, and you could argue it's going to get bench boost scores in a couple of weeks, and even in Game Week 12 that is a possibility. You've got Fabianski away to Newcastle, you've got Cunha and Aït-Nouri away to Fulham, and then Lewis Hall at home to West Ham. So you could argue you've got too much squad depth here, and I've got nothing left over in the bank. So if you aren't able to afford this team, you could downgrade one of these defenders to Van den Berg or just any 4 million defender to sit third on your bench week in, week out. Even Joachim Andersen at 4.3 million, if you can afford him, he's another very good option because Fulham have great fixtures in the long term, despite the next 4 looking a bit mixed bag for the Whites. Also in terms of the midfield, you could argue Semenyo over Rodgers if you have the extra funds available to you, and I think Fernandes for Saka will be very popular if you also want to go for Isak up front, and then this sort of structure with Gabriel and Konate in the back line. In terms of goalkeepers, I think Verbruggen is the best 4.5 million goalkeeper in the game right now, especially with Brighton's fixtures coming up. But Onana is the best goalkeeper in isolation, so if you can afford him and you don't want to go for Mazraoui or Dalot, I would suggest Onana in the long term. But Man United have some tough fixtures coming up beyond the next 2 game weeks, so Ruben Amorim, it might take a while for him to really get going with the Red Devils. I still think he'll continue their trajectory and they'll compete for 4th spot this season, and he'll have a massive impact at the club and potentially even win some trophies in the process. But I think in terms of the captaincy, Salah is the standout against Southampton away, but you can go against him with the likes of Cole Palmer, Isak and Saka. That's the way I'd rank the captaincy choices with this 50-man squad. You might even argue Bruno Fernandes over Saka is another possibility for your FPL team and also for the armband. I think Isak against West Ham at home looks phenomenal, and of course Cole Palmer against Leicester City away. I could see a massive return there from the Blues talisman. But let's now show you a different sort of structure where we have Bruno Fernandes in this midfield, but it does mean a downgrade in the forward position. So this is what I've come up with. Verbruggen instead of Robert Sanchez, and I've got 0.1 million left in the bank with this squad, so it's slightly cheaper than the last one I showed you. I've still got Gabriel, Konate, Aït-Nouri, but Lewis Hall starts in this case against West Ham at home. You could feasibly go for Joachim Andersen at home to Wolves though. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but with Cunha up front in this team, I've decided to kind of avoid that sort of conflict. The midfield 5 would be Mbeumo, Saka, Salah, Palmer and Fernandes, and over time you could downgrade Mbeumo to Rodgers, Semenyo or Smith Rowe, and then use those funds to upgrade one of Welbeck, Cunha or Van Olsen to Isak, Nicholas Jackson or another mid-price forward, maybe even Ollie Watkins if you're backing Aston Villa to turn things around. They're another team like Man City and Arsenal who have really struggled in recent weeks. But as you can see, Welbeck and Cunha up front, a bench of Fabianski, Evanilson, Anderson and Aït-Nouri. And if you are a bit unsure about certain things, I completely understand that. I'd possibly consider starting Evanilson over Cunha this week. I think Fulham will beat Wolves, and I'm not really too keen on the Wolves assets in Game Week 12, particularly Aït-Nouri, despite the fact that he can salvage something through an attack and return. The expected points here is 60.2, but also if I put Cunha back in, it goes down to 59.8. So using FPL Team suggestions, it's actually very competitive with the main wildcard squad I showed you earlier, but that has a slightly higher expected points figure for Game Week 12. But the wildcard chip is a long-term tool. It's not all about the week right in front of you. It's about how it sets you up for the long term, and I believe both teams do that in the best possible way. With the captaincy, as I mentioned earlier, Salah and Palmer are the standouts, then Fernandes and Saka will be next in line for the captaincy with this alternative wildcard team. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. I promise to get this video to over 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 5,000 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It would go a long way supporting my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 12 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.